Royal Enfield just did something most Harley riders would have called impossible 10 years ago. On paper, in the United States and worldwide, they've pulled ahead, not in hype, but in units sold, export growth, and even market value. If you've spent the last few decades putting miles on a Harley touring bike, this is not about trashing your ride. This is about what the numbers now say about the brand you trusted, and the one most riders used to laugh off as a budget import. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how Royal Enfield just beat Harley in America, with hard sales data, factory output, dealer behavior, and profit margins. So stick around till the end, because the most surprising number in this whole story isn't the one you think it is: sales shock. In the most recent 12-month cycle, Royal Enfield sold close to 1 million motorcycles worldwide. Harley was in the ballpark of 150,000. You do not need a calculator to see how lopsided that is. That is the kind of gap you used to see when Japanese brands steamrolled British iron in the 70s. What really stings Milwaukee is where those Enfield numbers come from. It is not just home turf in India. Exports alone from Royal Enfield, the bikes that leave India and go to riders overseas, are now sitting within striking distance of Harley's entire global total. Industry reports put Enfield's exports north of 100,000 units, while Harley struggles to keep global retail above that same neighborhood. That means the overseas slice of Enfield's business is almost matching all the machines Harley moves everywhere. Wall Street has noticed. Market value tells the same story your gut already feels. Analysts tracking both companies now show Royal Enfield's parent outfit valued higher than Harley-Davidson in total market capitalization. A brand that many American riders barely knew 10 years ago just stepped over the hometown legend on the financial scoreboard. That is not a fluke quarter. That is a power shift. And Enfield is not buying that growth with discounts alone. Operating margins, the money left after building and selling the bikes, are stronger at Enfield than at Harley. So they are selling more motorcycles and making more on each one they move, even while charging less at the showroom door. That is the part that should make any investor or any rider who watches the business side sit up straight. Put bluntly, the volume and profit lines say the same thing. One company is in full climb, the other is in a slow glide, hoping the runway shows up in time. Sales figures prove who is winning the scorecard, but they do not explain why riders are switching sides. And that answer starts where every seasoned rider feels it first, in the wallet: price reality. Riders do not buy charts. They buy what they can afford and what feels worth the money. That is where Royal Enfield's advantage turns from numbers into real metal in real garages. Walk into a multi-brand dealership right now. On one side, you see a new Enfield Twin or Classic Single, sitting at a price tag that a working retiree or younger rider can actually swing. We are talking entry prices that land closer to the cost of a decent used car, not a second mortgage. On the other side, the new Harley touring rigs and big cruisers sit way higher, often into the mid-teens and above, before you add a single accessory. Dealer pricing sheets tell the same story. You can get into a brand new Royal Enfield for what many Harley buyers used to spend just on options and chrome. The down payment is lighter, the monthly note is smaller, and the insurance quote usually comes back easier to swallow. For riders who remember when you could walk out of a showroom without signing your life away, that matters. The gap does not stop at sticker price. Real ownership cost is where Enfield really tightens the screws. Routine service on a simple air-cooled Enfield can cost a fraction of what a modern Harley visit runs. Once you factor in labor rates at big branded dealerships and the price of factory parts. Independent mechanics report that Enfield jobs come in simpler, with less time tied up in bodywork removal or proprietary tools. Pricing is what gets a rider to sign on the dotted line once. Keeping him around takes something different, and that starts with how a brand treats its riders between paydays, out on the road and in the parking lot. If you want more videos like this, hit subscribe and share your take in the comments. The Enfield Tribe. Royal Enfield did not invent motorcycle community, but it sure learned how to run it like a machine. That is a big reason those lower prices turn into long-term loyalty instead of one-and-done sales. Look at their global ride events. The annual One Ride gatherings put tens of thousands of owners on the road on the same day, all over the world. Official counts from recent years show rides happening across dozens of countries, with turnout growing every season. These are not just showroom photos, they are real riders burning real miles together, sharing stories, swapping parts tips, and posting it all online. Then you have bigger adventures like the Himalayan Odyssey. Enfield organizes guided trips through rugged mountain passes that most touring brochures will never show. Riders pay good money, take nearly 3 weeks off, and do it on Enfield machines by choice. You do not get that kind of commitment if the bike feels like a disposable appliance. You get it when the brand has convinced people they are part of something bigger than a payment book. A strong community can gloss over a lot of sins, but it cannot hide a machine that is a headache to live with. The next step in Royal Enfield's rise is not just that people ride together, it is that the bikes keep running without draining every spare dollar. Real-world upkeep. Talk to any rider who actually wrenches on his own machine, and you hear the same concern. It is not just, can I afford the bike? It is, can I keep it on the road without getting bled dry? That is where Royal Enfield has quietly stacked up another advantage. Their motorcycles are built with simple, proven layouts and widely shared components. That gives the parts network a huge edge. Regional warehouses can stock what is needed for most models without filling a building the size of an aircraft hangar. Dealers and independent shops report that common wear parts and service items tend to be on the shelf or only a short shipment away. Riders are not sitting around for weeks waiting on a specialty bracket or a rare sensor. Warranty claim data, where it is available, lines up with what you hear from the field. Dealers handling both brands talk about Enfield's coming back for smaller, easier fixes, while certain premium American models can turn into big, complicated jobs, especially once you drift out of factory coverage. Less complexity means shorter time on the lift, fewer labor hours, and a lower bill when you roll back out. Reliable, affordable ownership does not happen by accident. It takes factories, supply chains, and planning built for volume and simplicity, not just prestige. That is where the story shifts from what happens in the showroom to what happens on the production line. Built for volume, Royal Enfield did not beat Harley by accident. It built the factories first. Over the last decade, Enfield poured money into plants built for serious volume. Modern lines outside Chennai were laid out to push hundreds of thousands of motorcycles a year without choking on bottlenecks. Investors who walked those floors talked about wide aisles, modular stations, and flexible tooling that can switch models with minimal downtime. That means when demand jumps in a region, Enfield can lean on existing capacity instead of scrambling for overtime or pushing deliveries back for months. Third-party production audits show utilization rates that stay healthy, but not desperate. In plain language, they are running hard, but not redlining the machinery. That extra headroom is what lets them answer sudden surges from export markets without shorting their home base. Harley, by comparison, has been trimming plants, shifting work, and trying to balance legacy factories that were never meant for this kind of global mid-weight push. High volume also changes how suppliers treat you. When Enfield goes to a casting house or a suspension maker, it is talking about contracts measured in hundreds of thousands of units, not just one run of a few thousand large cruisers. That scale earns priority on raw materials, better pricing on components, and a more stable pipeline when the world economy gets jumpy. Riders might not see that on the spec sheet, but they feel it when the bike they ordered actually shows up on time. Big factories only matter if they are cranking out the kind of machines riders actually want to buy. And that leads straight into how Enfield chose its lineup: right-sized bikes. Royal Enfield looked at the modern rider and aimed straight for the middle of the bell curve. Not the richest, not the flashiest, just the folks who actually ride to work and take weekend runs. That shows up in the way their lineup leans on midsize. Approachable machines instead of chasing the biggest, heaviest iron on the lot. Sales mixes published by industry trackers show that Enfield's bread and butter lives in the 300 to 700 cubic centimeter range. That is the sweet spot for riders who want enough power to hold highway speeds with luggage, but not so much bulk that low-speed parking lot work feels like wrestling a refrigerator. Harley used to have more options there, yet over time kept drifting back toward large touring rigs and high-ticket cruisers that look great in a catalog, but intimidate new or smaller riders. For riders who might be tired of wrestling a full-dress tourer at low speeds, these midweights also start to look like a smart second machine, something you can take into town or down a gravel road without worrying about three-point turns on a 1,000-pound beast. That is how a value brand ends up sneaking into garages that once flew only one flag. Having the right classes on paper still means nothing if the machines are annoying to live with, which is where Enfield's design choices come into focus. Built for riders, you can feel the difference between a motorcycle built for brochure numbers and one built for people who actually maintain their own machines. Royal Enfield leaned hard toward the second camp. Pop the seat or side covers on most modern Enfields, and you see familiar, straightforward layouts. Filters, plugs, and adjustment points are reachable without tearing half the bike apart. Service manuals are written, so a competent home mechanic or a small-town shop can follow along without a factory laptop. That stands in sharp contrast to some high-end American models, where routine jobs can require expensive specialty tools or a full strip-down of bodywork. None of this means Enfield is stuck in the past. They still use modern materials, fuel systems, and safety features where they count. The difference is priority. Ease of ownership weighs as much as bragging rights. Riders who used to tackle their own work on older Harleys see that, and many quietly appreciate a machine that respects their tools and their time. Straightforward engineering only helps if the bike and the parts are actually in reach, which is where Enfield's distribution and aftermarket plans come into play. Dealer invasion. Royal Enfield understood that if you want to win riders in America and Europe, you cannot just ship containers and hope. You need boots on the ground, parts on shelves, and dealers who feel supported. That is exactly what they have been building. In the United States, Enfield set up a dedicated subsidiary based in the upper Midwest, right in territory long claimed by Harley. From there, they began recruiting independent dealers who already knew how to treat serious riders, but needed a line of bikes that normal folks could still afford. Over a few seasons, the dealer map filled in, not just on the coasts, but in secondary cities and working-class towns where price tags matter most. When a rival can match you on showroom presence while undercutting you on total ownership cost, cracks in the old king's armor start to show, and that is where Harley's own weaknesses begin to matter far more than they used to. The next generation gap. Harley built its empire on riders who came of age in the 1970s and 1980s. Those folks are the backbone of the brand, the ones who remember saving for that first big twin, who plastered bar and shield stickers on toolboxes and garage fridges. Dealership data still shows a heavy tilt toward buyers in their late 50s, 60s, and even early 70s. That loyalty kept the lights on for a long time, yet you cannot outrun a calendar. Survey work from industry groups paints a rough picture. Younger riders in their 20s and 30s do not hate Harley. They just do not see the same value. Asked what matters most, they point to price, everyday practicality, and the ability to afford more than one toy. Many of them live in cities or tight suburbs. They do not have room for a massive touring rig, and they are already wrestling with housing costs and debt. Dropping car money on a new heavyweight cruiser sits way down their list. A brand that relies on one aging generation without fully replacing it is in a classic demand fade. The iron stays heavy, but the pipeline thins out. You can feel that strain whenever a young rider looks at a price tag and quietly walks away, which leads straight into Harley's hardest pill to swallow, the way its pricing collides with reality. For more hard evidence on where the bike market is heading, hit subscribe so you never miss the next warning. Resale reality. Harley always carried a premium. For a long time, riders were happy to pay it. That extra cash bought an image, a sound, and a sense of history you could not bolt onto anything else. The trouble started when prices kept climbing while ordinary incomes did not. Take a look at dealer sheets from recent years. Many brand new Harley, touring, and big cruiser models sit in a band that used to belong to luxury cars. By the time you add taxes, setup, and a handful of must-have accessories, you are staring at a number that would make most working families sweat. A smaller group of high earners can still stroke that check. Yet the broad middle of riders, who used to scrape together enough for a new Harley, see those numbers and back off. When a brand's pricing floats too far above what the next generation can or will pay, the showroom becomes a museum. Somewhere between keeping margins high and protecting the badge, Harley lost touch with what many everyday riders could justify, and that misread set the stage for deeper strategic missteps. Plan, pivot, repeat. Numbers tell one story. The way a company behaves tells another. Over the last several years, Harley has sent mixed signals that left dealers and longtime riders shaking their heads. Leadership changes at the top came in waves. Each new team arrived with a fresh slogan, a new plan, or a pivot toward some promised future, then moved on before the dust even settled. Corporate filings and press releases trace the pattern. Strategic plans were launched, rebranded, then quietly trimmed. One year the focus was on global expansion. The next, it was pulling back to protect the core. One line of middleweight machines would be hyped as the new gateway for younger riders, only to see limited promotion or confusing allocation. Dealers who bet big on that messaging found themselves holding inventory without clear support behind it. While Harley wrestled with its own reflection, the rest of the motorcycle world kept moving, and that opened gaps you could ride a convoy through. The new rivals. Markets do not wait for any one brand to sort itself out. While Harley dealt with aging buyers, tough prices, and leadership churn, other manufacturers paid very close attention. They saw the gaps opening in the mid-weight, value-conscious segments and began moving metal into that space. Major Japanese makers expanded their offerings in the 500 to 800 cubic centimeter range with straightforward, practical machines tuned for real-world riding. European brands that once chased only high-end performance riders introduced more approachable standards and light touring machines that undercut big American cruisers on both weight and price. Even smaller regional companies stepped in, offering simple, honest motorcycles aimed squarely at riders priced out of the premium slice. Royal Enfield slid into that realignment with perfect timing. While others chipped away at different corners of Harley's base, Enfield locked onto the value, heritage, and day-to-day usability mix that spoke directly to the riders slipping through Milwaukee's fingers. As dealers and manufacturers adjusted, the old pecking order of the motorcycle world started to bend, setting up wider consequences than just which logo sits on a tank. What dealers push? Walk into a big, multi-line dealership today, and you can see the shift without touching a spreadsheet. A few years ago, the prime floor spots were heavy American cruisers and full-dress tourers. Now more and more of that space is going to mid-size standards, light tourers, and classic-styled machines that people can actually afford. Dealers follow money, not romance. When Royal Enfield units start moving quickly at realistic prices, the smart stores roll more of them out front. Slow-moving big iron gets pushed to the back row or the used corner. Internal channel memos from several major manufacturers echo the same theme. They talk about rebalancing toward midweight platforms, capturing younger riders, and aligning showroom mix with emerging affordability trends. Stripped of corporate polish, that means they watched Enfield chew into the entry and comeback rider crowd and realized they needed their own answer. So you see fresh paint on old mid-size frames, revived classic badges, and new promotional budgets pointed right at riders who would have once defaulted to Harley without thinking. Behind those showroom decisions, though, sits a bigger referee that no brand can ignore. Trade rules and tariffs that tilt the playing field long before a crate ever hits a dealer lot. Tariffs and freight. Most riders judge a bike by how it feels on the road. Governments judge it by what crosses a border and who gets paid. Import duties and tariff schedules have become quiet weapons in the fight over who sells what, where. Royal Enfield builds in India, ships to North America and Europe, and still lands many models at prices well under Harley's domestic offerings. That only works because the company has tuned its supply routes and sourcing to keep landed costs low, even when politicians start playing games with percentages. Trade filings show a patchwork of arrangements. Some countries treat Indian-built machines favorably under regional agreements. Others slap extra duty on any imported motorcycle, regardless of badge. Harley once leaned on the "built here" card to justify higher prices at home, yet rising material and labor costs inside the states have eaten into that advantage. Meanwhile, Enfield's scale in India lets it negotiate hard on everything from steel to shipping, then spread those savings across hundreds of thousands of units. All of those big moves on maps and spreadsheets eventually show up in real towns, in the form of jobs gained, jobs lost, and new kinds of work popping up around the bikes riders actually buy. Where jobs go, Bike sales are not just numbers on a quarterly slide. They are service advisors, techs, warehouse workers, and small machine shops that live or die by what rolls out of the showroom. As Royal Enfield grows in export markets, its footprint reaches further into local economies that used to lean almost entirely on Harley and the Japanese majors. New dealerships open, regional warehouses get staffed, and independent garages pick up training to work on Enfield models. Every one of those changes puts fresh names on paychecks. Factory hiring notices from India tell one side of it. To support global demand, Enfield has steadily added shifts and expanded plants. Those jobs stay overseas, yet the downstream work spreads everywhere their bikes land. In North America, you see service center openings in towns that once only had a single big American dealer. Parts distributors bring on more staff to handle increased orders for Enfield components. Smaller fabricators start cutting brackets, racks, and guards tailored to those frames. That is new money flowing into corners of the motorcycle world that had gone quiet. Once you zoom out past the pride and pain in those changes, you are left with the question that matters most in a garage conversation. What all of this really means for the person paying for the bike, and for anyone betting money on these brands from the outside. Garage and stock choices. For riders, the message is blunt. The market is starting to reward brands that respect your wallet and your daily routine more than your willingness to pose. Royal Enfield's rise shows that accessible pricing, honest performance, and real community can beat a famous badge that leans too hard on history. If you are shopping, it means you have more leverage than you did 10 years ago. You can walk into a dealership, look past the big shiny cruiser, and know there are other options that will take you the same miles for less money and fewer headaches. From an investor's view, the scoreboard has already started to flip. Valuation charts over the last few years show Enfield's parent company climbing while Harley's line sags or bumps sideways. Operating margin snapshots underline the shift. A company that sells huge volume at healthy profit per unit on simpler machines has a sturdier base than one leaning on ever pricier flagships to keep numbers up. That is not anti-Harley talk. It is just how the math looks when you strip away emotion. The road ahead is not set in stone. Brands can change. Riders can change. What is clear already is that the old order, where one American name owned the idea of real motorcycling, is gone. The new reality is a world where value, reliability, and community decide winners. The question every rider and every shareholder has to answer is simple: whether they are ready to let go of loyalties when they no longer add up, and whether the legends in Milwaukee are willing to hear the message coming from the very people who kept them alive for so long. So here's the bottom line. The badge on the tank doesn't matter if the numbers and the miles don't add up for you anymore. If you've got seat time on both Harley and Royal Enfield, drop your year, model, and miles in the comments so we can all learn from it. If this helped, hit like, subscribe, and share it with a rider who needs to see the proof.